Have you ever thought of traveling to other countries in the world? You know, a lot of people bring up right away the issue of, is it safe there? I'd like to tell you some stories today, and I'll deal with that question of is it safe. But first, uh, I'd like to tell you how my wife Darlene and I got started on 34 years of living in other countries of the world. It was a good experience for us. Well, not everything was good, but overall it was good. And I want to stress that we did not start out our adventure with a whole lot of confidence. And so I'm going to tell you some stories, and maybe you can plug into it somewhere with your own thoughts and feelings and experiences. I was about to graduate from college when the bomb dropped. A professor asked me, David, would you be willing after graduation to serve in a foreign country? Maybe Japan or Taiwan or the Philippines or perhaps Hong Kong? I was flabbergasted. I've never thought of such a thing in my life, was the only thing I could say. And he then pressed me a little more, and I said, well, you know, I'm going to have some time to think about this, and also to talk with my fiancée about it. Take your time. That's okay. Just get back to us with an answer when you can. Darlene and I talked about it, and we came up with an answer that was something like this. We don't know how to answer your question. We've had so little experience, just some little time in Canada, which isn't really hardly a foreign country, and we just can't answer. If you think that we can do what you want us to do, give us a definite call to someplace, and then we'll give you a definite answer. Well, they thought about it, and they did call us. They called us to the Philippines. And we said, yes, we'd go. And that was the story for 18 years. After the 18 years, we did go to other countries yet, but that's ahead of the story for right now. I'd just like to tell you how we began. Our credentials were very weak. I was a raw rookie as a husband, newly married. I didn't know very much about what they had called me to do there. I wasn't able to do a lot of that yet. I was going to have to learn. Darlene was a new wife too. Her mother, of course, had never allowed her in the kitchen during her younger years, so she had to learn a lot about cooking from the start. We had zero experience, really. No foreign language learning, no knowledge of Philippine culture or customs or whatever. We didn't have it. So what do you do when you're 10,000 miles from home and you've got to start things that you don't know how to do? Well, you start where you can and where you must. And we had to be able to ride a bus to our language teacher's house. The Tagalog language, the language of Manila, was what we were going to learn. And so we got to the bus stop, and here came the bus. And it looked like it was packed. There were people all over, and there was a conductress hanging out the side door, and she was making a motion like this. And we understood that to mean, sorry, but the bus is full. You'll have to wait for another one. And the other one came, and the conductress did the same thing. And then somebody at the bus stop talked to us and said, do you realize that she's encouraging you to get on? We thought she was telling us not to get on. No, in the Philippines, this means come on. We thought it meant stay away. Our learning had begun. The first in a long line of lessons. I want to tell you honestly, before we get too much farther with the stories, that I was working there as a Christian pastor and missionary in the Philippines. And that was the work that I was called to do there. In that same year, my first year there, I presided over my first funeral. It was something. We were just about ready to put the body in the ground when the sister of the dead man began to wail and weep and shout and scream. And she was about to jump into the grave when the family held her back. Now, during this time, I was starting to fume inside because this lady, and I was thinking, she never even paid attention to her brother when he was alive, never visited him in the hospital, and now here she is putting on a big show. I was furious by the time it was over. But after the funeral, somebody came to me and began to explain some things. And he said to me, do you realize that she was doing what it's expected that Filipino family members will do? That's an expectation, a culture, it's a custom almost. If she had stayed calm and cool and collected beside the grave, she would have been sending the message that the family doesn't care about the one who died. It's Filipino custom to do that. She was playing her part for the honor of her family. Well, it didn't dissolve my bad feelings about the whole thing, but it did teach me something. It isn't what it looks like sometimes. I had a preconceived idea of what that meant, and it was wrong. I have this saying, we went to the Philippines to teach. We stayed to learn, and the learning kept going. When we left the Philippines 18 years later, we had 3 special souvenirs with us, 2 girls and 1 boy. All 3 children had been born in the Philippines, and they were somewhat reluctant to leave. Our oldest daughter put it like this: Mom and Dad, you're going home, but we 3 are leaving home. We'd never thought about it that way. Our own family was teaching us lessons about living in foreign countries. Well, we did take the 3 of them home, not all willingly, but they all went. And we spent 7 years there before it was time for us to move on to another foreign country. And this time it was Mexico, Guadalajara, Mexico. My calling there was to serve as pastor missionary of an English language congregation in Mexico, in Guadalajara. That meant that we had members from all over the city, English-speaking members. Guadalajara is a big city, 4 to 5 million people in those days. And as a result, I had to contact people all over this large city, and I found out that I wanted to use the telephone a lot because it took so much travel time to visit in the homes. Let me give you a clue about learning language. Some people don't want to travel overseas because they don't want to learn a language. I want to give you some free advice, a free clue about how to learn a language in a foreign country in a way that might be easier than what you have in mind. I discovered that when I phoned the members in order to contact them, I often was speaking to a member of the household, a maid or a helper of some kind, who spoke no English. And there I was speaking only very minimal Spanish. I couldn't get the job done on the telephone many times. What I did was to contact one of the language teachers in our language school, and I told her what I needed to be able to do in Spanish, the words I needed to be able to say. When will they be back? May I leave a message? Can you tell that person this for me, please? Those are the things I needed to say in Spanish. The teacher made up the Spanish words and conversation for me, and she also made the other side of the conversation what replies I was liable to get when I said the things I wanted to say. I memorized both sides of the various kinds of conversation, and I began to make my calls in Spanish. You know, it didn't take very long when I was confident about doing that work. And it gave me joy to be able to speak enough Spanish to get through to the maid, so the maid could get through to the master or the mistress and get the job done. That gave me confidence to tackle the rest of the Spanish language, the other things I needed to learn to say, with joy and with some strength. Free tip. You know, we had members in that group, that congregation there, of 14 different countries represented. All of them, of course, were English, spoke enough English to be happy with an English language church. 14 different countries. Wow, did we have a time when we had a potluck lunch. Everybody would bring their national specialty. You didn't want to be absent on those days. That was fantastic. And they were fun people besides. They all had stories to tell. And we told our stories, and they trusted each other, and they liked to work together. It was a great time. From Mexico, we moved on to South Africa. And there, I was a teacher in a small rural college. And what a time to be there. 1992 through the year 2000. We had front row seats at the drama of the struggle between traditional apartheid and democratic principles that the black people wanted to bring in. The discussion went like this. Shall we negotiate some kind of political settlement, compromising and coming to some agreements, or shall we have a civil war that will destroy the country? They weren't sure which choice they were going to make. We watched the whole thing develop, and what a thrill it was for us to watch on television in 1996 when Nelson Mandela, for the first time in his life, voted in his home country. Those were exciting years. Incidentally, we also learned to drive on the left side of the road in South Africa, which follows the British system, and it isn't as hard as you think. You just have to practice a little bit on the rural roads and get used to doing it on the opposite side of the road, and it comes. It's okay. We learned. You can learn too. We'd like to encourage you with that little bit. You know, I've just begun to tell my stories. I've got a bunch of them. And I'd love to meet with you again sometime, and I hope you'll tune me in again on YouTube somewhere, and we can talk some more about these things. And if you'd like to contact me, I would love to hear from you. If you've got questions or comments about anything I've said today, please contact me. My email address is going to appear, and I'd just love to open a conversation with you. See you next time, and I hope you'll consider the possibility that you might enjoy going overseas to a foreign country. Think about it. Let's talk about it. See you next time.